So, okay, we've talked a lot about once you're in, here's how you grow your career.
Yes.
Let's wind it back a little and talk about how do you get in? How do you recruit, or when you're in your career, how do you make that shift?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of information about general recruiting out there, but question that I always get is, you know, hey, I see there's already 1,000 applicants to this role,
Yep.
and my team is hiring somebody and we have 5,000 applicants already. Question is, what aspects help me stand out? Like,
Yeah.
how do I stand out my resume and my work, but also how do I stand out as a person with whoever's making the decision?
Right. Yeah. No. So it's funny. I feel like the overarching theme of this entire conversation is like focus on outcome and measurable outcomes, because
Yeah.
it is, and I think that that's well socialized on the internet of like, this is how you stand out. But I still like review a lot of early in career resumes, and granted, it can be challenging when you're early in career. Like sometimes all you have are kind of like, I didn't have the opportunity to see this end to end, or like I wasn't overall accountable for this thing, so all I have are actions. But
Yeah.
as much as you can, being able to frame your resume bullets, like I just mentioned for your, performance reviews, as those like, crisp, like I did this, which led to this outcome, or I worked with these people, which led to this outcome. Those resumes are very few and far between, I will say. Even
Mm.
as you get into like, I've reviewed resumes from, early in career all the way up to like principal level people. And more often than not, there's just kind of a tendency to just fall into the like, well, here's what I did. And it's
Mm.
like, okay, but if I read a resume where it's like, here's what I did and here was the measurable outcome I was keeping in mind and
Mm.
drove, it's like, wow, like you're thinking end to end. And
Yeah.
so that I think is the number one thing that I will just keep harping on, that really helps you stand out in terms of resumes. And then I think the other thing too is, to the extent that you can showcase curiosity on the resume. So like personal
Mm.
projects, staying up to date on the latest trends, even if it's just like stuff that you've dabbled in, or like maybe you're interested in like learning AI. So you like started a Substack to like share your learnings with AI as you went through like a Coursera course or something, right? But even
Yeah.
just that kind of, I think those little things can help you just kind of be like, oh, like this person is curious, they are willing to share their learnings
Yeah.
broadly, they're writing things down and they're thinking about them and synthesizing it, like
Yeah.
thinking about the kind of like hallmark PM skills and how you can
Yeah.
showcase those and just kind of practice them in your day to day, I think is also, and then putting those on your resume also can help you stand out.
Totally. The common theme amongst that is communication, and that's a
Yeah.
key, competency rather than a skill for
Yep.
PMs. Is like you have to learn how to communicate yourself,
Yep.
your product, etc.
Yep.
Now,
Yeah.
if we were to kind of take the lens of students, whether these are like undergraduates or like MBAs trying to break into PM, we've both been through that process. So I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
what advice do you have for folks who are at the very, very beginning of their journey and they have a degree and maybe some side projects, or they have a degree and that's it?
Yeah. Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I think the thing that I usually kind of say is there's so many different types of product managers out there, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
growth PMs, which are you're on a fairly well established product that likely has product market fit. You're looking at a lot of data, you're running a lot of experiments to figure out how do we unlock this next stage of hyper growth. There's 0 to 1 where you're like you definitely don't have product market fit and you're starting from the ground. There's like technical product management, which is a lot more like getting deep into architecture and working with your engineering managers and sometimes more project management stuff. There's
Mm-hmm.
product managers that sit in the business to business world, there's the business to consumer world. And so I think like doing a little bit of soul searching and kind of figuring out like what energizes you, what motivates you. Like if data is just like you makes your eyes glaze over, like do not try to get into a growth
Yeah.
PM role kind of thing.
Yeah.
um it's kind of the first thing, because then you can kind of figure out like, okay, this is the type of PM role that I want. I think
Mm-hmm.
once you figured that out, then tailoring your resume, like we talked about, not worrying too much about domain expertise. Like I think there's ways that you can tailor your resume and your past experiences to align with the things that are required for that type of role. Like
Yeah.
one example that I like to tell a lot is like I actually invited a fire chief in for a interview once, because like no
Wow.
products, no product expertise at all, but like the way
Mhm.
that he had phrased his resume was just like, yeah, like this feels like someone that's like, has the grit, has the curiosity, has the empathy for people, that like I'll take a chance and like interview, why not?
Yeah.
um and
Yeah.
so that I think is also, I think a lot of people kind of get bogged down. They're like, I don't have the expertise. It's like, even if you don't, just thinking more broadly about like what skills do you need to have as a PM, and like you've probably practiced them in your day to day, and you can tailor and your previous
Yeah.
roles or internships or even in college. So
Yeah.
being able to tailor your expertise to that, I think is super key. And
Yeah.
then, the other thing that I've seen work for people as well, especially in this job market, is just like looking for PM adjacent roles, right? Sometimes it's super hard. Maybe you've been trying a lot and it's just like it's not working to break in. I've seen people kind of fall back and then say, like, you know what, like I could, I went to school for marketing and I could get a marketing role, or I could get a design role or an engineering role. And
Mhm.
then, showcasing that you have more of those PM tendencies, like kind of once you get the foot in the door, it's sometimes easier to hop that way as
Yeah.
well. So that's another thing that can work. Um, and then I think the last thing is just, spending some time on like self-development too. Like this is kind of something that I think is helpful even when you get into interviews, because like, if you've never been a PM before and some hiring manager takes a chance on you, I get a lot of questions about like, how do I prepare for the interview? Like I've never done a product interview before. And just like, reading a lot of books, like I can send a list offline if it's helpful, of like podcasts and resources, just kind of like flexing that muscle in your own head of like thinking like a product manager, and kind of understanding the frameworks that get employed and like how they view
Mhm.
the world is helpful, just so that when you're in those interview scenarios, even if you've never done it, you can talk about like, well, I don't have, I've never exactly been in this scenario, but if I were, here's what I would do. And if you can kind of have that narrative well
Totally.
thought out, it will help you, I think, stand out, even if you don't have the direct experience that the hiring manager is looking for.
Totally. And I loved your point too about like PM adjacent roles, or just being able to communicate like where your experience lies and how it ties in, because about a third of PMs, and this is a little different at Microsoft, but across the industry, a third of people coming into product do not come from a technical background.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's totally fine, because more and more too, like you don't, we're not making engineering decisions typically.
Yeah.
So I don't think that should discourage people. If anything, it is a cool differentiator where it's like, if you have a great story and you can translate your experience, that will help you stand out for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.